And I learned a lot from him. And that kind of gave me the motivation or the spark to continue on with photography. I came back to the States after the Peace Corps experience and was living in St. Paul, Minnesota, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I joined a collective darkroom.
The what? The collective?
A collective darkroom for photography.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Dark room. Okay, gotcha.
And from there, I learned an awful lot about black and white photography, about developing the film, printing. It was a really good setup because there were some professional photographers upstairs. The downstairs darkroom was fully equipped with very good professional enlargers. And we could go up and ask opinions or ask advice on what we were printing from the people up at the front desk. And from there, I was kind of hooked on it. I did that for a while, especially traveling, and I've always been drawn to people and people's stories. And I ended up, when I got married to my wife, Marie, we had kids, I got a normal job, and that kind of took a lot of my creative time away from me in the sense of doing photography. So I went more to, family photographs and things of that nature, more snapshotish. And then when I retired in 2007, my wife Marie Keis and we went to Mexico for a year. And Marie had been going for quite a long time giving sketching workshops, and I went with her several times on those trips. And this time we decided to go back and just spend a year, and that's where I really kind of got more into the documentary part of Mexico. Marie died in 2011, but she had a project called Faces and Stories, a sketchbook journey in Mexico. And what she had done was she would sketch people, and while she sketched them, they would start telling their life story. And she never was able to finish that, but I had promised her on her deathbed that I would do something and continue on with her project and her sketches. And so what I'm doing basically right now with livelihoods and the sketches or the photographs of working people in Oaxaca is that same idea. I've got the photographs of them, but I've also interviewed almost all of them. There's more than 30 people that I've done so far. So I have their stories, and to me, the stories are as important as the photographs. The people telling, I guess you would call them ordinary people. I like to put the suffix extra in front of that, because even though they're what we would call ordinary workers, they're not famous, they're not known for doing anything that draws news attention, but they're people who are really proud of the work that they do. I got into that idea back in I think it was the late 60s. There was a book that came out by Studs Terkel, and he was a journalist for the Chicago Tribune or newspaper. And the book was called Working. And he did something, he interviewed many, many, many people who were elevator operators, custodians, what you would call ordinary jobs. And that book impressed me. And I remember in that book, the majority of those people didn't feel that their work was valued. They changed their name from custodian to sanitary engineer, to give them a feeling of importance, or that what the work that they did had value. And so the project that I'm working on now is kind of focusing on that. These people, almost all of the ones that I have photographed, are proud of the work they do. And they do it to the best of their ability. None of them are wealthy people, but they're artists in their own right. And so that's kind of where.
I've seen the photographs in the Corinne Woodman Gallery are really all older people. Did that sort of automatically flow out of your subject, or?
Yes. The original project started back in 2015, and I was part of a photography collective in Oaxaca, Mexico. And someone got a grant, and they decided that they were going to do something for the International Day of Art, which I think is around April. I think it's Da Vinci's birthday or something.
Oh my.
And they decided they wanted to do it on oficios. And oficios in English translate as livelihoods or occupations. And they wanted to focus especially on occupations that were in danger of dying out.
Mm.
So again, a lot of the people that I photographed are doing occupations that are dying out. I mean, one of the people is a public scribe. He's in the market. He's got an old Corona typewriter, and he used to write love letters for people. And now he fills out government forms that are in triplicate and carbon paper.
Because there are so few illiterate people.
Well, and also there's people have access to computers and cell phones, and they can text. So in terms of doing those kind of things, they don't need to write and send letters anymore.
It would be such a romantic gesture for anybody to send a love letter written by a Mexican scribe in a corner of a plaza. I so go for that.
A lot of the people are older, and again, so far the people I've photographed, only one that I know of has died, and I keep I formed relationships with all of these people. And
yeah, you can see that in the photographs. It's
not a one-time visit. I've gone back several times, and I could have gone back many more times to get the photographs that I would really have liked to have gotten. And out of that came friendships, and many of them lived right around my neighborhood, because I spend 6 months of the year in Oaxaca. And many of them are in my neighborhood, and so I stop by and see them. I have a cup of coffee with them. I've done a couple of shows in Oaxaca. One of them in the Casa de la Cultura, the cultural center, and it was really nice because about 5 of them or 6 of them were able to come to the opening.
Oh, how wonderful! So they could see how they were presented.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's very nice. I noticed that the man who is, and I don't recall their names. I should, because I feel that would be an important part of your project. The bird man, so to speak. He looked so elegant. Mm-hmm. Did he dress up?
No, that's the way he looked. He kind of reminds me of Frank Sinatra. With his thing, his sweater thrown over his shoulder, and the photo itself, for those that can't see it now, he's an itinerant bird seller. So he, 1 second, hang up here.
Sure.
I don't know how to shut it off. It's my regular phone. 1 second. He's an itinerant bird seller. So he walks the streets of Oaxaca and sells birds. And he's got the cages piled on his back. He's got probably 12, 16 cages piled on his back. And but he's a very elegant guy. I've gone to his house. He's seen how he cares for the birds. He's shown me his credential that this is something that is approved by the government, that there's no mistreatment, that he's not taking birds that he's not supposed to. But I did 2 photographs of each person. That one of them with a backdrop, a painted backdrop, like the Mexican photographers used to do back in the 20s and 30s. Mm-hmm. Then I've done one, so that was more of a formal photo in which they're posing for the photograph. They all have the same backdrop behind them. And usually, almost all of them have something that indicates what their profession is. And then I have one of them actually doing the work that they do. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So that using that backdrop, do you have a studio in Oaxaca?
No, what I did, this was the idea. I'll go back for a second to our 2015 project. What we did there was, we did a public exhibit. And we had the photo, there were about 20 photographers and all that were involved in that. And everybody had, photographed different professions that they chose to do. And then we had them printed on large, what's the word in English? Kind of like a tarp, a canvas paper that could, and we hung it from the street posts in the.
It was outdoors.
Yeah, it was hanging from the street parts in the Centro Histórico, the historical center. And we had everybody gather at a point in the downtown area, and then we did a walk, and we walked and everybody got to see their photograph hanging from the lamppost. And then we went back and had an opening, but the opening was only for the photographers and the people that they photographed and their families. So there was no one else. There wasn't a public opening per se.
Mm-hmm. So that was the start of this particular project that you're working on now?
Right. And then what happened in the project was it was a success. All of us photographers really liked the idea. The people that we photographed were very pleased with being given some recognition for what they did. And we decided that we would continue on with it and make a book. And we hired a photographer out of Mexico City to be the curator. And over the summer, one by one, everyone dropped out except me.
Oh!
So the book never materialized, but I decided to keep going with it. And one of the women who was the head of the collective, a Mexican woman, liked the project and decided, I think you should go forward with it. And it was her idea, Marietta. It was Marietta's idea. She said, the problem with doing the portraits was you would go into someone's workshop. These were little tiny closets almost. They were small spaces. And they had all kinds of distracting things hanging on the wall. Baseball caps, T-shirts, eggs. And it was really hard for me to go in and say, would you mind taking everything down so we can do the photograph?
Yeah.
And eventually I got better at it. I kind of said, that plastic bag is really distracting. Could you move that? But we decided by doing the backdrops that would give a unity, that we would be able to photograph people without any clutter in the background. And then if there was some clutter in the actual photograph that we took, that's part of the reality of their situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the idea came. We hired a young Oaxaqueña, and I bought a large piece of painter's canvas, and she painted, the backdrop, which is supposedly, again, just something that's not distracting, but it's just kind of in the background to give some kind of uniformity to all the photos. Yeah,
you only see it in second view, really. Then you start to notice, they all have that same background. It is very neutral. It really works that way. So
the way that I did with that, because I don't have a studio, which was your initial question.
Oh yeah.
I had it rolled up and in a bag. And then I had a frame, kind of a metal frame made for me by one of the people that I photographed was a blacksmith. So I had him, asked him if he would make me kind of a structure that I could hang it from.
Yeah.
And I would take the structure and I would take the canvas and I would jump on a bus and I would go to the pueblo, wherever I was going to go to photograph the people or in the neighborhood. And then I would set up the backdrop wherever I could find room.
And so you worked with daylight?
Yes. Yeah, it's all daylight. There's almost no artificial light. I might have used a flash a couple of times, but it's almost all natural light.
Yeah. And did you ever move to color photography? What attracts you so much in black and white? Because we haven't mentioned that, but this is a series of black and white photographs.
I've always liked black and white. I mean, when I was working in a dark room, obviously it was far too complicated to do your own color work. The temperature controls and everything that are required, you needed to have a professional lab. And I've always liked the feeling of black and white photography. I think that color can add a lot, especially in Mexico. You know, Oaxaca is a colorful, colorful place.
Yeah.
And these places of magical realism, the houses are colored pinks and baby blues and turquoises, and you know, people do daring things that you would think in the States they would go, oh my God, how would anybody ever paint their house that way? And it works perfectly because the people next door painted a complementary color to their house.
Yeah, yeah.
So the color would be great. I think it can also take away from the heart of the photograph. The color can. There's one exception that I did. I did a photo project in Juchitán, which is in the south of Mexico, and it's a matriarchal society, extremely colorful. And there's a group of people that are called the Muxes, and the Muxes are transgender people. They refer to themselves as a third gender. So they're either they cross-dress. Many of them are always cross-dressed, and some of them only do it for big events. I went down there for one of their big festivals, and I had to do it in color.
Yeah.
I mean, their blouses are embroidered, in these sparkly, bright colors, and there's flowers, and there's color everywhere.
Yeah.
They're black and white. I would have lost too much. But otherwise, I think in doing portraits of people, I think the grays and the whites and the darks allow you to bring out more of the essence of a person. Yeah.
I think it works really well. And you mentioned you're working on a book. How close are you in developing that? Is that a wish, and how would you go about that as a photographer to get a book published?
How
are you going about it?
Yeah. The idea was, when I started this project, I used to be, and I still am to a certain extent, very timid about taking photographs of people. I had to overcome that in this process. But where was I going with that? What was your question again?
Well, how do you develop a body of work like this to become a book?
Okay, so when I started when I started finally asking people for permission, I would say, look, I'm working on a book, and the book is being sponsored by the Ministry of Culture, because that was part of some of the money that came from there. And I'm wondering if you'd give me permission to photograph you, and I'll give you copies of photographs. I'll bring you nice 8x10 photographs. And I told them, and I'm going to make a book, and I owe them a book. I mean, I started in 2015. As I said, some of these people are in their 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
If they don't do it soon, they're never going to get their book. And so how am I going to do it? It'll probably be self-published. I had some interest from the UNAM, the big university in Mexico City. A professor of anthropology said, they might be, we might be able to publish this. There's a possibility that falls in the line of what they would like in the anthropology department. Otherwise, I'll self-publish, because I really feel that I need to do this for these people. And I think that it's more important, first of all, that it's done in Spanish or bilingually.
Yeah.
And as I said, I've interviewed everybody. I've done almost all the transcripts of listening to the recorded interviews, drawing out what I think is important, trying to have commonalities between why they like their work, how they began, so on and so forth. So right now I've got most of the transcripts done, a good portion of them translated into Spanish, and I had that done by a person who's a Mexican who's a Spanish teacher. So I made sure that there was no grammatical errors and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So right now with the pandemic, I have no excuse not to
not to push forward and do the work.
Like, I don't always like listening to the put the headphones on, listen to the interview with the person, and then try to decide, okay, some of them go on automatic. You ask them a question and they run with it. And there's other people who give you 2 words and stop. and then you have to try a little bit further. And so at the
Yeah.
end, some of them you say, wow, I'm going to have to edit this down. It's way too much. And there's other, you're going to say, this is going to be an awfully short one.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your, do you have favorite anecdotes or occupations that that struck you? I was struck by the bird seller, because it's such an unusual for our for our society, such an unusual profession, and it looks so elegant. And the scribe would be unusual, but we have shoemakers, not
Right.
maybe so many sandal makers, but.
Well, the bird, I'll tell you a story about the Carlos, the bird vendor. He lives about 6 blocks from me. So we run into each other, and he calls me on the telephone sometimes and makes sure to see if I'm in Mexico. And he told me about a pilgrimage that takes place, one in Mexico City and one in Guanajuato. And it's all the bird vet now, like he's one. And like I said, they have bamboo cages that they carry in a backpack, and they come way above their head. They probably have 16, 18 birds in these little bamboo cages. And I went to the one in Mexico City. He invited me. He said, you should come. And he said, there's hundreds of us, and we all have the birds, and they do a march, about a 2-hour march through Mexico City to the Basilica, where the Virgin of Guadalupe appeared, and they get their birds blessed. So that was kind of nice, because he told me about it, and I said, I really want to go. So I went and I photographed that. And I mean, those are the kind of connections that you get. It's
amazing that they have a society of bird sellers. That must have been quite a sight.
I'm looking right here. I moved it. He gave me, and I just found it on my desk today. He gave me a little medal of the Virgin, that the Guadalupe, and with a little thing about it. It was the 2010 pilgrimage that they had taken.
Oh, yeah. So what gets you in your studio in the morning, other than that you feel you owe these people their book? What motivates you?
I love this project. I mean, and it's the people, and I mean, part of it, as I said, is that I want to be able to complete my promise to these people. And part of it is also a promise to Marie, because as I said, we used to go out together, when we were in
plug in. Yeah, I'm still listening.
Okay. When Marie and I were together in Mexico, she was a addicted sketcher. She had her sketchbook with her constantly, and anywhere we would go, waiting in a bus depot to catch a bus, she was sketching. And she was either sketching the person sitting across the seat from him, or she was sketching a coffee cup that was on the table in the cafe. And at that time, I was messing around with my camera. And what I found was there was a big difference between how people reacted to us. We would be sitting let's just say we're sitting in the Zocalo in the square of a little town, and Maria is sketching. And all of a sudden you see all these people, especially kids, coming over and looking over her shoulder and seeing what she's doing. And especially the kids, they would sit down and watch her. And me, on the other hand, people were a little bit suspicious. Why is this guy taking photographs? What's he going to do with the photographs?
They couldn't see what you were doing, and they could see what Marie was doing.
Exactly. And I actually went with Marie on some sketch strips and actually learned to do a little, or learned. She I did some sketching, because she said, you don't learn, you do. And but after Marie's death, I kind of said, my interest, and I think my forte, is more with a camera than with a pencil or a pen. So I kind of left that behind.
So what would you advise a starting photographer to do? You found a niche, black and white photography of people. even outside of this project?
Yeah, I mean, I photograph people. I do some scenery and some landscape, but that's not my passion. It's people, and especially people that I can form a relationship with. So, it's people that I hope that I can come back to. I always, if possible, arrange to give people
A photograph.
a photo, and I try to do that. I have a very small portable printer with me that I bring to Oaxaca. Can do 8x10 color photos as a Canon. It's a really nice little thing. And there was one time in Juchitan, which is a matriarchal society. These women are nobody to mess around with. They're big women, they're strong charactered, and you better not mess with them. And they had a bad experience a few years before I was there with Elle magazine from France. And the Elle magazine had written an article about them and saying that it was a women-dominated society, and that the men were lazy and they just kind of stayed home and drank. And the women did not like that, right? And they said, well, because the men were fishermen, they were farmers, they were doing work, they weren't being seen in the markets because that was the women's job. And so I wanted to take some photographs there, and the friend of mine who lived there, said, a Juchiteca, kind of said, well, they're pretty, cautious about it. So I went up to one, and she had a little girl, a beautiful little girl, and she was a flower seller. She had beautiful flowers. And I said, can I take a picture of your little girl? And I said, I'll bring you a copy of it right away. And I did. I took the photo. I went back to my hotel room, and I was back within an hour, and I gave her the photograph. And then all of a sudden, all these other women who were kind of are saying, would you take one of me?
Yeah, so they could see what you were doing.
And they knew that I was going to deliver, that I wasn't going to say, come back.
Yeah. What is your most gratifying experience in your photographic adventures?
I think again, it's the relationships that form with these people. I mean, recently I've had to some of these people now in Mexico, because of the pandemic, there's no tourists, so they don't have money. So what they do, they're in dire straits economically and financially. And I've been able, I think we were talking about this the other day with the stimulus check that I didn't really need. I was able to send some money back to those people who couldn't pay the rent. They couldn't get food. And one man in particular, Pepe, he makes something called monos de calenda. Monos de calenda are these giant 10, 12-foot puppets that are put on a bamboo frame.
Yeah.
And they dance. They use them all the time. Every wedding has those, and so on and so forth. And I think
no gatherings, no puppets.
Huh?
No gatherings, no puppets.
Yeah, people aren't celebrating, or they're not. They're not allowed, or the socialization because of social distancing. And there's a couple of, people are just having a hard time. And I think the fact that able to do that as friends, as someone who's a friend, and I think that's the most satisfying part, that you make a friend in what you're doing.
Yeah. So you've really transformed from a visiting American to a part of that community, even though you're half-time.
Yeah, I think so. It's what happened out of that was that after people found out that I was okay, that I wasn't going to try to rip them off and sell the story and run away with the money, that they got photographs, that they saw what I was doing. I informed them when I wrote something. I would, get it translated and bring it over and say, does this sound like, did I get things right? Is there anything you want to add to that? I forgot the question again.
How you became from a visiting American to being part of that community.
Well, people began at that point. I would go. In the beginning, I had to search. I had to say, I'm looking for a guy that makes huaraches. Do you know anything? And afterwards, after a time, I would get done, and they would say, "Hey, do you have a photograph of somebody who makes mezcal?" And I said, "No, actually, I would love to have one." well, I have somebody for you. And, here's the person's phone number, or here's the contact information. And so it was getting to the point where I was being referred to other people rather than having to look.
Yeah, that's a great turnaround in a project like this.
Yeah.
What are you going to do when you're done with this?
I've got another one that, again, my wife was an avid sketcher. She was also, trained in Paris in the Beaux-Arts. She was a printmaker. And I made a promise to her on the deathbed that I was going to do something with this project that she had, Faces and Stories, a sketchbook journey in Mexico. My first thought was, well, I was with her some of the time, not all the time, and I know something, so maybe I can parallel that, her sketches with my photographs.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That worked so-so, and so I've got them in here. I've got like 4 boxes of sketchbooks, and some of them are France, some of them are Mexico, and I'm focusing on the Mexico ones. And I call the project kind of as a working title, Dos Perspectivas, the 2 perspectives, 2 ways of looking at things.
Okay.
So some of them may have photographs if I find that they're not repetitious or that they add to something, and the rest of it can be text because even though I wasn't with her all the time, I knew a lot of the stories that took place. I lived in the same place that she did the sketching. So that one, that's been 10 years, and I haven't made near the progress that I want. So, and that I got sidetracked, I guess, with this project, the photographic project, which is basically the same idea. It's faces and stories, not sketched, but photographed. So that promise also has to be finished. And in a way, like I said, I do dread spending a winter in Oregon after 10 years having the sun of Oaxaca. But,
yeah, I was going to ask, do you have plans of going to Mexico shortly?
Not this year. My daughter's giving birth around Christmas, and I'm the only living grandparent. And given the pandemic, and they already have a 3-year-old, so I think that's going to be my project for the winter. Yeah. But I do have things to finish up, and I do want to go back. Right before I came back here in March, I had a good possibility of doing this show in a place called Centro Cultural San Pablo, which is a very good venue right in the heart of Mexico City. It's a very nice.
That's very nice.
Yeah, but unfortunately, what happened with the pandemic, I was in the midst of arranging things, and it looked very promising. They liked the idea. They were even saying, well, you've got videotapes. Let's do something with those videotapes, and we've got people that can do the editing, and we can put together, a multimedia kind of thing with this. Then the pandemic hit. Everything kind of came to a halt. The person that I was working with in San Pablo got laid off. And so right now it's just kind of laying,
Yeah.
But I do want to go back, and, that particular place, San Pablo, is a little more chic. It's a little more upscale. But I actually loved doing the photographs in Casa de la Cultura. Casa de la Cultura is like a community center here in this sense. And it's very inexpensive. They have all the arts. They have music, they have clay, they have painting, they have dance.
Yeah.
And everybody can afford it. So you see people coming in with their kids, and they're dropping them off for a guitar lesson. And when I did my show there, again, it was a lot of similar photographs of working people. And what I loved about that was they would stop on the way out after dropping their kids off, and they would be looking. And even one guy told me, he said, my grandfather was a baker, and he's looking at the picture of the guy baking. And other people, similar comments. They were seeing something that
they remembered.
Right, their father, their mother, their grandparents did as an occupation, and they kind of felt that it was being validated. So to go back, if I didn't have it at San Pablo, and I know the Casa de la Cultura has already said, you can show here again. I would go back and do it there. In a way, I prefer that those people see the photographs than the people who would see it in San Pablo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with that, I'm coming to the infamous last question. And thank you so much for these stories. I think what it showed actually, how you describe it also. Your photographs seem to do what art is for, and that is making connections and communicating people's feelings and people's existence. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited that we were able to show your photographs. But now that last infamous question, if money and size or place was something you didn't have to think about, what artwork would you like to own?
I would like to own a piece of work by Francisco Toledo. Francisco Toledo is he died about a year and a half ago. He's a Oaxacan painter, sculptor, jewelry maker. He did everything. And he was also a political activist. And he used his money for political purposes. He was very much in the movement against the transgenic corn. He led, parades or protests down the street where the police couldn't shoot him. He's too famous. Yeah. And he did everything. There was, I think, every art form that he did. He could sketch, he could paint, he could photograph. And so I'd like to have a piece of Toledo's that I could put here. And I love in either that or a guy named Rodolfo Morales. And Morales is one of these kind of magical realism painters where his colors are bold, bright, vivid colors, and there's people blowing trumpets floating through the air and through the clouds.
Oh, okay.
Just a lot of fun. So I think that's what it would be, either something by Morales or something by Toledo.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I want to repeat again, this was a talk about Dick Keis' work called Livelihoods. It's in the Corinne Woodman Gallery in the Art Center in Corvallis, and our hours are Thursday through Saturday from noon to 5. I hope you all get to see it. Dick, thank you so much for making those photographs and for taking your time to talk with us about your work. I know that for a lot of visual artists, that is not the most fun thing to do, but I have a feeling that for you, it might be part of the work is talk about it and make those connections.
Well, thank you. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share the photographs there. I appreciate that very much as well.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Hester.
So now I'm trying to stop recording.